The just concluded Paris Olympics might well be one of the most controversial of recent times, not in the least because of the sex controversy involving two boxers with XY male chromosomes who went on to win their respective female category golds. Algerian boxer Imane Khelif won the gold in the 66 kilograms category, while Taiwan's Lin Yu-ting won her Paris Olympics boxing final in the 57 kilograms category. Both boxers were earlier barred by the now de-recognized International Boxing Federation after failing sex tests, quote-unquote, but the IOC rules allowed them to participate in the Olympics. What has exacerbated the situation is the fact that the IOC outgoing chief, Thomas Bach, suggested that there is no definitive way to identify male or female anymore, inviting widespread criticism for allowing ideology overtake biology. Now, while the exact nature of the differences in sexual development of these two athletes has not been revealed or their test results have not been made public, it is being considered reasonable to say that they have the 5-ARD condition that some athletes competing in the past in female sports have also been diagnosed with and therefore objected to. So what exactly is this condition? Now, this condition affects sexual development before birth and at puberty. Genetically, the people with these conditions are male with X and Y chromosome in each cell. They have testicles but cannot produce dihydrotestosterone or DHT. Those with 5-ARD are assigned sex at birth based on the genitalia that can be observed externally. They also have increased levels of male hormones, particularly at puberty, which leads to higher muscle mass. Those with 5-ARD cannot develop much facial or body hair. Most of the affected individuals are unable to have biological kids. To decode this entire row and really where should we stand when it comes to males or females in such complex cases, evolutionary biologist Colin Wright is joining me. Colin, these boxers fall under the category of what we know as DSD athletes, which means they have XY chromosomes or higher testosterone. But what we have seen in the past too, not just with these two but other cases, is that generally at birth, they are identified as female, they are even brought up as girls. So the biggest and the first question is, are they male or are they female?
Yeah, so by and large in our species we have males and females, but there are some rare edge case situations where individuals who are still biologically male or female can have what are called differences of sexual development or disorders of sexual development that can result in at least the appearance of either sexual ambiguity at birth or may cause an individual to be perceived as the opposite sex at birth. This is the case with a lot of these DSD cases we see that get into the Olympics where certain male athletes are competing with females. And by and large, they get that far in these competitions because at birth they have female-appearing genitalia. So especially in developing world countries that aren't doing a lot of prenatal screening for chromosomes and things like that, the doctor, just based on the appearance of the newborn's genitals, might classify or assign this infant a female sex on their birth certificate. And then it's not until later in life, this individual is raised as a girl and things, and it's not until puberty where those internal testes, because this is in fact a biological male, turn on, and this causes this individual to go through a normal male puberty where they get bigger, faster, stronger, all of those effects that we are trying to control for when we have the male and female categories in sports. The whole justification for having these separate sports in the first place is because of the enormous athletic advantages that going through male puberty confer to an individual. So there are certain DSDs where we're not too concerned if they're individuals, like a condition called complete androgen insensitivity, where their bodies are completely unresponsive to testosterone. They look female, they don't go through a male puberty, and people don't really have a problem with that. But in this case, because these athletes are responsive to testosterone, that's why it's justified to exclude them from the male category, or from the female category, sorry.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, there are some deviations or differences in sexual developments which you may not necessarily have a problem with. Don't you think that's where it gets fuzzy? Where do you draw a line that this amount of deviation is okay and anything further is not okay?
So it really comes down to, has your body received enough testosterone to make you undergo some sort of male puberty, at least partially or fully. So conditions like partial androgen insensitivity syndrome, they would be excluded from the female category because again, their bodies have gone through male puberty to some degree that gives them those advantages, because females generally are not exposed to these elevated levels of testosterone during puberty that would make them have an unfair advantage. So, biology can be complex sometimes, and I'm not saying that there'll always be a very clear-cut way to categorize some athlete. There might be some athlete that falls right outside the boundaries of what we consider eligibility for the female category. But just because there might be some athlete that falls right outside an established boundary doesn't mean we need to keep expanding that boundary to keep capturing those borderline. At some point, again, if we all agree that we want a female category, once you say that a female sporting category is something that we value, you have to have criteria, and you need to be strict on what that criteria is and tell athletes who don't fit it that, I'm sorry, you are not allowed to compete in this female category.
You know, the other question as far as this particular case is concerned is that for these two boxers, we haven't really seen their tests or the results. We are going by indications from the Boxing Federation that they have XY chromosomes. Don't you think that maybe some of the conjecture then could be unfair because we don't really know exactly what condition they have?
Yeah, so I don't see any reason to doubt the IBA's claims about the test that they performed. I've written about the possible conditions that these athletes might have. I think that case of having complete androgen insensitivity, I think we can, well, we can definitively rule that out. One, because their bodies are clearly androgenized. You can see through just their facial structure, and this isn't the type of thing you would see in someone whose body is completely unresponsive to testosterone.
Sure.
Plus, in a recent interview with Le Point magazine, Imane Khelif's trainer talked about how they did have elevated testosterone, and that they had been working to bring down Khelif's testosterone, and that when they did bring down the testosterone, Khelif got less strong, lost a lot of muscle mass. That wouldn't happen if you're completely insensitive to androgen. So we can rule out complete androgen insensitivity. Partial insensitivity remains, I think, a remote possibility, because it doesn't appear that Khelif is partially receptive. Just to be honest, it appears like she's gone through a full male puberty. The most probable condition is a condition called 5-alpha reductase deficiency syndrome. This is the one that Caster Semenya and all the other athletes have.
Yes.
It makes sense because they're commonly misclassified as girls at birth, but their bodies are totally receptive to testosterone. This is why we see it show up so much in the pinnacle of women's athletics, and why we need to be increasingly vigilant for it.
Well, the IOC president very famously recently said that there is no scientific way to determine who is man or who is woman. I'm sure you want to comment on that.
The level of incompetence at the very top is really staggering for someone like me, who's a biologist. They've also mentioned that they're open to ways to make this process more robust in sex testing, but they said, there wasn't a good scientific way. Well, that is just completely false. And I know all the people who have been sending emails and trying to call this person to sit down with meetings who have these robust ways that we can protect the female category. He won't return their calls or emails. So they've just got their fingers in their ears. They've had them in their ears for well over a decade. And they haven't learned anything from the past when we had, for example, in the Rio Olympics, where the top 3 athletes, the gold, silver, and bronze medalists for the 400 meters women's category, were all biologically male. So this is a huge problem. Problem still persists. And hopefully we get someone new, because I know he stepped down recently from his position. He won't be renewing his contract. So hopefully the next person who's in charge of the IOC understands just some basic biological realities.
The IOC has also said that they don't like these quote-unquote sex tests, and they've banned them a long time ago. But many people argue that to know sex or chromosomes, tests no longer need to be invasive or uncomfortable. What would these tests be and what would they entail? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I think it is currently the case where we need to start implementing these types of screens for athletes in any situation where we have a protected female category. So anytime, presumably after puberty, would be when you'd want to start to do these types of tests. If you care about the integrity of the female category and you want to make sure it's for female only for reasons of both fairness and safety. The ways that we test this now is through a cheek swab. This is old technology. It is incredibly accurate because our chromosomal makeup is what determines whether it will develop into males or females. Now, of course, there are very, very rare exceptions, but we can make exceptions for these exceptions. It's not just like because it's not a 100% perfect test, we need to throw out the entire thing and just base on passports like the IOC is doing right now. I think it's important to maybe not call them sex tests, but call them sex screenings, where we have the first round of a sex screen that is going to be looking at chromosomes. That's going to feed out basically any male who's simply just identifying as a female trying to compete in those sports. And it's going to catch individuals who have certain DSDs like Caster Semenya or Imane Khelif and Lin Yuting from Taiwan. But of course, once you get past that first round of screening, there are certain conditions, as I mentioned, like complete androgen sensitivity syndrome, that most leagues have no problem with. So then you could, appeal that process or say, you've been flagged for this. We need to do a little bit more investigation to look for things like, is your body responsive to testosterone? Have you actually gone through any aspect of male puberty that will confer you an unfair advantage in the female category? That's where we need to be. It is not invasive. Again, literally a cheek swab. We're not telling people to undress and stare at their genitals or anything like that. We require verification of an athlete's weight when we try to put them in weight categories and things like boxing. We need to be able to verify people's sex to make sure they're eligible for sex categories. I think this is a pretty common sense approach.
Let me expand this a little bit, because a lot of people are, kind of talking about where we're headed as far as all of the conversation around sex, biology, gender is concerned. Do you think what happened at the Olympics was more to do with ideology than anything else? That fair play is being sacrificed at the altar of inclusion?
It is, I would say, ideology is driving most of it. We heard, just as you said, the president of the IOC said that there's no way to test scientifically whether someone is male or female. That is just categorically false. There is a lot of what I would call pseudoscience being spread in our society by a lot of activists who are trying to say that just because some people might be difficult to categorize, therefore we're all somewhat difficult to categorize. And we just need to blow up the whole categorization system completely because maybe it's just a white Western colonial construct using to oppress people. These are the types of things that you hear from this. This is just rooted in racism and white supremacy and Western imperialism, that type of stuff. Yes. That is just completely false. We've been, the evolution of male or females, these things have existed for probably around 2 billion or so years is when they first evolved. So they were here before the IOC, they were here before even humans even existed. Males and females are a real category, and we know what that means to be male or female. So we need to throw away the ideology and just get back to actual apoliticized biology.
But when you say that there's only a very small percentage of us who may fall outside the very conventional definitions of male and female, what is that percentage like?
So the percentage of people who can be considered to have what are called intersex conditions, although it's sort of misleading because it makes it seem like sex is the spectrum, even though it's a binary rooted in sort of reproductive capacity. Intersex just means individuals who appear either sexually ambiguous or like the opposite sex at birth, and this is just an appearance only. This is about 0.018% of the population, or about 1 in 5,500. And again, this is just appearances only, so tests can then go in and verify looking at chromosomes, and especially, after puberty, if they elide any sort of detection early on, it becomes apparent pretty quickly, especially during puberty. So it's a very small number of the population. the overwhelmingly vast majority of individuals can be unequivocally categorized as male or female just at a glance.
Okay. Uh, you've been at the cusp of this entire gender debate, particularly on social media and otherwise scientifically, that has been raging in countries like the US particularly. Where do you see this debate heading? Is biology winning yet?
I think the vast majority of people understand that males and females are not social constructs and that males shouldn't be competing in female sports. Almost everyone I talk to on both sides of the political aisle totally agree with all of this, and they just want to apoliticize this. They think it's crazy. The thing that's keeping this going is that the major institutions have sort of been captured by this very small and very loud and very willing to shame anybody who says otherwise activist group. And so I think there is more willingness to call out these people and not care what they say about us, that we're bigots or transphobes or whatever, because that's just not the case. We just care about biological facts. More and more people are tired and they're not staying silent anymore. So I think we're a few years out before the tide really begins to turn. But honestly, and it's unfortunate that events like this, where we have to have two women who've been robbed of Olympic gold medals, but these are very catalyzing moments. They make a lot of people say, what the hell's going on? We need to do something about this. This happened with Leah Thomas. This happened with Caster Semenya. Might take a few more of these events just to make some change happen. This might be one that makes some change happen, at least in the Olympics. We'll see. But even though it's a shame that this had to happen, you kind of need to go full crazy before we can start reeling things back in, just so people get whiplash from how crazy the world is, and then they want to get things back in the realm of sanity as quickly as possible.
Well, who would have thought we'd be talking about craziness and sanity when it came to the Olympics? But Colin Wright, biologist, thanks a lot for joining us and telling us more as far as understanding what these deviations in sexual development are. I leave you on that note. Hard facts will follow on the other side of a very short break.